At 37 years old, Zephyr Hayes, a dedicated biopharma research scientist with a salary of $124,000 a year, believed in the quiet power of data. Data didn't lie. It didn't have moods. It simply was. On Sunday at 8:17 p.m., in the sleek, minimalist dining room of a Back Bay apartment he didn't like, he received his final data point. The rent on this apartment was $3,200 a month, a sum he paid without complaint. The wine on the table was a $78 bottle of Sancerre that his wife Sasha had selected. The meal was seared scallops with a saffron risotto, a recipe she'd found in a glossy magazine, the ingredients for which had cost him $92 at the local market. Everything had a price. He was about to learn the cost of his silence. They were eating in near silence, the clink of their silverware against the $400 Villeroy and Bach plates, the only sound, punctuating the soft jazz playing from a Sonos speaker in the corner. Sasha set down her fork with a delicate yet decisive tap. Her deep brown skin, usually luminous under the recessed lighting, seemed to absorb the light tonight, leaving her features shadowed and unreadable. Her hair was styled in intricate cornrows that spiraled into a tight bun, a work of art that had cost $250 at her preferred salon on Newberry Street. "You know," she began, her voice casual, almost bored, "I was thinking about Aiden today." Zephyr felt a familiar tension coil in his stomach. He said nothing, merely taking a slow sip of the crisp, white wine. Aiden was the ex-boyfriend, the ghost who haunted their marriage, the yardstick against which Zephyr was perpetually measured and found wanting. Sasha sighed, a theatrical exhalation of discontent. She looked at Zephyr, her gaze sweeping over his simple gray cashmere sweater, a $150 piece he'd owned for 5 years, and his calm, thoughtful face. His short, neat locks were a testament to his low-maintenance personality. She saw none of the quiet strength, the fierce intelligence that had led him to co-author 3 major patents for Genzyme. She saw only what wasn't there. He just had this presence, she continued, looking past Zephyr as if picturing someone else in his chair. When he walked into a room, you felt it. He was ambitious. He wasn't afraid to take what he wanted. Zephyr placed his fork and knife neatly on his plate, his appetite gone. He waited. He knew the script by heart. This was the 4th time this particular performance had been staged. Sasha finally looked at him, her eyes cold and dismissive. The final data point was delivered without ceremony, a clinical, verbal incision. "You'll never be half the man my ex was." The words hung in the air, more chilling than the breeze coming off the Charles River. They were meant to wound, to provoke, to incite a reaction. In the past, they had. He had argued, defended himself, demanded to know why she would say something so cruel. Tonight, something was different. The data was in. The conclusion was irrefutable. Zephyr felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, not even the sting of humiliation. He felt only a profound and terrifying clarity. He looked at his wife, the woman he had loved, the woman for whom he had compromised his own comfort and finances, and he saw a stranger. He saw a problem for which there was only one solution, and in the silent space where his love for her used to be, a plan began to form, cold and perfect and precise. He had no idea how completely his life would change by Friday, but he knew with the certainty of a proven hypothesis that he would not be spending another weekend in this apartment. Have you ever been in a situation where one single sentence changed everything? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding your own strength. The silence that followed her statement was absolute. It was not a wounded silence filled with unspoken recriminations. It was an empty silence, a vacuum. Zephyr's mind, trained to see patterns, immediately began collating the previous instances, the data points that had led to this final, incontrovertible result. The first time had been just over a year ago. It was a Tuesday. He remembered because he'd just come home from Gensheim's Framingham campus after receiving news of a promotion. It wasn't the senior director role he had been gunning for, a position that would have pushed his salary to over $200,000, but it was a promotion to senior scientist at PROS. And it came with a respectable $12,000 raise. He'd bought a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, the $65 bottle they'd had on their first anniversary, and presented it to Sasha with a hopeful smile. She'd been scrolling through her phone, lounging on their $4,500 restoration hardware cloud sofa. She barely glanced up. "Oh, that's nice, Z," she'd said, her tone flat. He explained the new title, the added responsibilities, the pay bump. She finally looked at him, a flicker of something he mistook for interest in her eyes. "So, not the director job, then?" "No, not this time." "But it's a step," he'd said, his enthusiasm already deflating. She'd shrugged, turning her attention back to the glowing screen of her $1,200 iPhone. Aiden was a vice president at his firm by the time he was 35, she'd murmured, almost to herself. Then she looked at him, as if he were a disappointing line item on a budget. "You'll never be half the man he was." The words were a slap. He had tried to argue then. "That's not fair, Sasha. My field is different. Academia and research have a different timeline." She had just waved a dismissive hand, the diamonds in her $8,000 engagement ring catching the light. "Excuses, Zephyr. It's always excuses." The second time was 6 months later during a heated argument about money, or rather, her spending of his money. A statement had arrived for their joint credit card, the one he paid off in full every month. On it was a charge for a $3,500 Chanel handbag. He earned a good living, but they were supposed to be saving. He had his own Beacon Hill condo, a premarital asset worth $1.2 million that he was paying a $4,800 monthly mortgage on, in addition to the rent here. It sat empty because Sasha found the historic neighborhood dull and full of old people. His dream home was a holding pattern, a line on his expense sheet. "Sasha, we talked about this," he'd said, holding the paper. "A $3,500 purse? We're trying to build a future." She had snatched the statement from his hand. "A future? Zephyr, this is the future. People like us are supposed to have nice things. I will not be the only wife among my friends who looks like she shops at a thrift store." Her friends were the wives of bankers and surgeons, women who saw luxury as a birthright. "My clothes are not from a thrift store," he'd said, his voice low. He was wearing a pair of well-kept jeans and a simple crew neck shirt. "And your closet is full of designer labels I paid for." "Barely," she'd scoffed. "Aiden would have bought me the bag and the matching shoes without even blinking. He understood that you have to spend money to project success." She'd stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You just don't get it. You're so small. You'll never be half the man he was." That time, the argument had escalated into a full-blown shouting match. He had slept on the couch, the $4,500 sofa feeling like a bed of nails. The third time, and the most humiliating, was just 2 months ago. They were walking down Newberry Street on a crisp Saturday afternoon. Sasha had wanted to look at a pair of $400 Christian Louboutin boots. As they passed the entrance to the Capitol Grill, a sleek, black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a $115,000 car, purred to a stop at the curb. The valet rushed to open the door. Out stepped a tall, handsome black man with skin the color of rich mahogany, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that probably cost more than Zephyr's car, a reliable 2018 Honda Accord he'd paid off 2 years ago. It was Aiden. "Sasha, is that you?" he'd boomed, his smile wide and confident. Sasha froze. Her entire demeanor changed. The bored irritation she usually carried around Zephyr vanished, replaced by a sparkling, girlish excitement. "Aiden! Oh my God! What are you doing here?" "Just a lunch meeting," he said, his eyes flicking over to Zephyr for a brief, dismissive moment before returning to Sasha. He didn't extend a hand. He didn't need to. His presence was a statement of ownership, of a past she had clearly never relinquished. They exchanged pleasantries for a few minutes, Sasha laughing a little too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm. Zephyr stood there, invisible, feeling like a coat she had forgotten she was wearing. When Aiden finally departed, disappearing into the dark wood and leather of the steakhouse, Sasha was buzzing. "Can you believe it? He looks amazing. He's a partner at his firm now. Just bought a house in Weston." That night, as they were getting ready for bed, she was still talking about him. "Did you see his watch? That was a Patek Philippe. That's a $50,000 watch, Zay." Zephyr, tired of the game, had simply said, "I'm happy for him." Sasha had turned from the mirror of her $6,000 vanity table, her face a mask of contempt. "Happy for him? You should be taking notes. That's a man who knows his worth." She had walked over to him, looking down at where he sat on the edge of the bed. "I look at him, and I see everything I wanted. Then I look at you." She trailed off, shaking her head in pity. "It's just sad. You'll never be half the man he was." He hadn't fought back that time. He had just turned off the light and pretended to sleep, the words echoing in the darkness. Each instance was a layer of sediment, pressing down, hardening his heart. He had absorbed the insults, the casual cruelty, the endless, draining comparisons. He had told himself that this was just a phase, that she was insecure, that his love could eventually heal whatever was broken in her. He had been wrong. The data was clear. This wasn't a bug in their marital code. It was the operating system itself. Now, back at the dinner table, the fourth and final utterance of the phrase settled not with a crash, but with the quiet click of a lock disengaging. Zephyr looked at the woman across from him. He saw the expertly applied makeup, the shimmering lip gloss, the cold calculation in her eyes. She was waiting for the explosion, for the tears, for the pleading. She fed on his emotional response. It validated her power over him. He gave her nothing. Instead, his mind, a place of order and logic, began to run a new protocol. It was the Disaster Recovery and Strategic Relocation Protocol. His senses, usually dulled by the fatigue of their constant friction, came into sharp focus. He could feel the weight of the silver fork in his hand, its polished surface cold against his skin. He noted the exact temperature of the room, a cool 71 degrees Fahrenheit, maintained by the central air system he paid for. He could smell the faint, cloying scent of Sasha's $320 Tom Ford perfume, mingling with the cooling saffron of the risotto. The $78 wine, which had tasted bright and effervescent just minutes before, now coated his tongue with the metallic tang of battery acid. Outside, a light rain began to fall. It started as a whisper, a soft patter against the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Boston skyline. The city lights blurred into a watercolor of reds, whites, and golds. The rain was a visual representation of the vulnerability he had felt for so long, a vulnerability he was now shedding like a second skin. He watched a single drop trace a path down the vast expanse of glass, a solitary tear for a marriage that had just died. He didn't see a wife anymore. He saw an unsustainable expense, a failed experiment. He mentally calculated the cost of their life together, the $3,200 rent, The $600 car payment for her Audi A3, the roughly $2,000 a month she spent on clothes, beauty treatments, and lunches with friends. Another $120 for groceries and high-end takeout. It was a burn rate of nearly $7,000 a month just to maintain her lifestyle. And that didn't even include the $4,800 mortgage and taxes on his own condo, the one asset that was truly his, sitting vacant and silent on Beacon Hill. The total was nearly $12,000 a month, almost his entire take-home pay. He was a human ATM, and his password had just been rejected. A memory surfaced, unbidden, an email from 2 weeks ago. It was from a recruiter at Genentech, a major player in the biotech world, based in South San Francisco. They had been trying to woo him for months. The latest offer was for a senior scientist position, a significant step up. The salary was $185,000. It came with a $50,000 signing bonus. He had archived the email telling the recruiter he needed time to think. He told himself it was because he was loyal to Genzyme, because he didn't want to leave Boston. But the real reason was Sasha. He had been afraid to disrupt her life, afraid of her anger, afraid of leaving the toxic comfort of the known. What he didn't know was that the email wasn't just an offer. It was an escape hatch, and Sasha had just handed him the key. He looked up from his plate, his face a placid mask. He met Sasha's impatient gaze. She was tapping her perfectly manicured nails on the polished wood of the table. "Well?" she prompted, annoyed by his silence. "Aren't you going to say anything? Are you just going to sit there and pout?" Zephyr picked up his wine glass. He swirled the contents, watching the pale liquid cling to the sides. He took a slow, deliberate sip. He set the glass down with a quiet click that seemed to echo in the room. "No," he said, his voice even and calm. "I'm not going to say anything at all." He stood up, took his plate, and walked into the kitchen. He scraped the $46 worth of scallops and risotto into the trash, placed the $50 plate in the dishwasher, and then walked out of the kitchen, down the hall, and into the guest bedroom. He closed the door behind him, the sound of the latch catching firm and final. He had just discovered the one thing that could save him, the power of his own absence. The guest room was small and impersonal, furnished with a simple bed and a nightstand Sasha had bought from West Elm for $400. It was the room he retreated to after their worst fights, a sterile sanctuary. Tonight, it felt different. It felt like a command center. He sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the room a stark contrast to the storm of activity in his mind. His love for Sasha hadn't just died. It had been autopsied, and the cause of death was chronic, systemic contempt. He thought back to how it all began. They had met at a fundraiser for the Museum of Fine Arts. He was there as a guest of a senior Genzyme executive. She was there with a group of friends, a whirlwind of laughter and vibrant energy. He was a quiet man, more comfortable in a lab coat than a tuxedo. His world was one of meticulous research, of trial and error, of celebrating breakthroughs that were invisible to the naked eye. His deep brown skin seemed to glow under the gallery lights, and his locks were tied back neatly, a sign of his disciplined nature. He listened more than he spoke, a quality Sasha initially claimed to find deep and mysterious. She was a paralegal at a small downtown firm, earning a modest $55,000 a year, but she moved through the world with the confidence of a millionaire. She spoke of travel, of art, of fashion. He was captivated by her vivacity, a stark contrast to his own reserved nature. He felt that she could pull him out of his shell, show him a different side of life. Their courtship was a blur of expensive dinners he paid for, weekend trips she planned, and her slow, methodical integration into his life. He, who had spent his 20s and early 30s living frugally, saving every bonus, investing wisely, was suddenly spending thousands a month to keep her happy. He had bought his Beacon Hill condo 2 years before he met her. It was the culmination of a decade of relentless work and sacrifice. A beautiful, white 200-square-foot floor-through in a historic brownstone, with original crown molding, a marble fireplace, and views of the gas-lit streets. It had cost him $1.2 million, a price that had required every penny of his savings for the down payment. It was his fortress, his proof that a boy from a working-class family in Roxbury could make it. When he showed it to Sasha, her reaction was lukewarm. "It's classic," she'd said, running a finger over the dark wood of the window frames. "A little dark, though, isn't it? And all these old buildings have plumbing issues." After they were married in a simple ceremony at City Hall, Sasha had wanted a $100,000 wedding at the Boston Public Library, a fantasy they simply couldn't afford. The issue of the condo became a point of contention. "I just can't see us living there, Z," she'd argued one night. "It's not our style. It's your style. I want something new, something modern, with a gym and a concierge and a rooftop pool." He had resisted at first. "But Sasha, I own this place. It's an investment. Renting is just throwing money away." "Think of it as an investment in my happiness," she'd purred, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We can rent a gorgeous place in Back Bay. It'll be our first home. Something we chose together." He had caved. It was a massive financial concession, but he told himself it was a small price to pay for marital harmony. So, his prized condo, his symbol of achievement, sat empty. He paid the mortgage. He paid the property taxes. He paid the condo fees, a total of $4,800 a month draining from his account for a ghost home. On top of that, he paid the $3,200 rent for the soulless glass box she loved. He was hemorrhaging money, nearly $8,000 a month on housing alone, all to please a woman who measured his worth against her ex-boyfriends. The facade of their domestic normalcy was built on his financial sacrifice and her casual disregard for it. There were scenes he now replayed with chilling clarity. Him spending a Saturday afternoon carefully assembling a $700 IKEA bookshelf for her expanding collection of coffee table books on fashion, only for her to say, "It looks a little cheap, don't you think?" Aiden had custom built-ins. Him carefully preparing her favorite meal, braised short ribs, a process that took 6 hours, and her barely tasting it before complaining about a stressful day at work and turning on the television. Her accepting a $2,000 Cartier bracelet for her birthday with a simple, "Thanks, it's pretty," before asking if he thought they could afford a winter vacation to St. Bart's, a trip that would cost at least $15,000. Each memory was a brick in the wall that was now rising between them. He had mistaken her expensive taste for ambition, her criticism for a desire to help him improve. He saw now that it was just simple, unvarnished greed and a bottomless well of insecurity. She didn't want him to be better. She just wanted what Aiden had. And she was furious that Zephyr wasn't the kind of man who would or could provide it on her terms. The life she wanted wasn't one they could build together. It was a life she expected to be handed to her, fully furnished and paid for. He was just the latest applicant for the job, and he had just been told, for the fourth and final time, that he was not qualified. He didn't sleep. He lay on top of the covers of the guest bed, his mind a whirring engine of logistics. The rain outside had stopped, and the first hints of dawn were beginning to streak the sky in shades of gray and pale pink. At 6 a.m., he rose. He showered in the guest bathroom, using a generic bar of soap and a spare toothbrush. He dressed for work in a pair of charcoal gray slacks, a crisp white button-down shirt, and a tie. The uniform of a man with nothing to hide. He walked into the kitchen. Sasha was still asleep in their master bedroom, a room he now thought of as hers. He made a pot of coffee, the aroma filling the sterile white space. He poured himself a cup, drinking it black. He felt no fatigue, only a strange, electrifying sense of purpose. He was a scientist beginning a critical experiment, one with no margin for error. At 7:15 a.m., Sasha emerged, wrapped in a $600 silk robe. Her face was free of makeup and her eyes were puffy. She looked at him, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. The lack of a fight last night had thrown her off balance. "You're up early," she said, her voice husky. "I have a lot to do at the lab today," he replied, his tone perfectly neutral. It was his first lie of the day, a lie of omission. His work today would not be in any lab in Framingham. She poured herself a coffee, adding a generous amount of cream and sugar. "Are you still angry about last night?" she asked, attempting a conciliatory tone. "I was just stressed. I didn't mean it like it sounded." "It's fine," he said, rinsing his mug in the sink. This was his second lie. It was not fine. But the truth was, a weapon he was not yet ready to deploy. He needed to maintain the facade of normalcy for a few more hours. He was playing dumb, acting as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis. Every calm word, every normal action was a piece of camouflage. "Good," she said, relieved. "Because I saw the most amazing pair of boots at Saks yesterday. They'd be perfect for the Genzyme holiday party." She was already back to the script, the one where he was the provider and she was the recipient. The boots were likely another $1,050 expense she expected him to absorb. "I have to go," he said, grabbing his worn leather briefcase, a $300 gift from his parents when he earned his PhD. "I'll be late tonight, don't wait up." "Okay, love you," she called after him, the words automatic and meaningless. He did not say it back. He walked out of the apartment, the door closing with a soft click. He rode the elevator down 22 floors, his face a calm, unreadable mask. In the lobby, the morning doorman, a friendly man named Carlos, greeted him. "Morning, Dr. Hayes. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day." "I think you're right, Carlos," Zephyr said, and for the first time in a long time, he felt it might actually be true. He got into his 2018 Honda Accord, a practical car with 78,000 miles on it, and pulled out of the underground garage. Instead of turning toward the Mass Pike and the 45-minute commute to Framingham, he turned east, toward the heart of the city. He drove through the awakening streets, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He wasn't pouting, he wasn't angry. He was gathering evidence, preparing his case, and acting with a strategic restraint that Sasha, in her emotional recklessness, could never comprehend. He was dying inside. But on the surface, he was just a man going to work on a Monday morning. She had no idea that he had already left her. She just hadn't seen the empty space yet. They had no idea what was coming. At 8:30 a.m., Zephyr pulled his Honda into a parking garage near Post Office Square. He walked 2 blocks to a small, independent coffee shop, not the Starbucks that Sasha preferred. He ordered a large black coffee and a croissant, a total of $7.50, and sat at a small table in the back. He pulled out his personal laptop, a 5-year-old MacBook Pro, and connected to the coffee shop's public Wi-Fi. The planning phase had now officially begun. First, he opened his archived email folder. There it was. The email from Sarah Chen, the senior recruiter at Genentech. The subject line read, "An incredible opportunity with Genentech's research team." He reread the offer carefully. Senior scientist. A leadership role on a team working on cutting-edge oncology therapies. A base salary of $185,000. A $50,000 signing bonus, payable within 10 days of his start date. Comprehensive relocation package. The location? South San Francisco, California, over 3,000 miles away. A different world. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He picked up his phone and dialed the number in her email signature. Sarah Chen. A bright, professional voice answered. "Sarah, good morning. This is Zephyr Hayes." "Zephyr, what a great surprise. I was hoping to hear from you. Have you had any more time to consider our offer? I have, Zephyr said, his voice level. I'm calling to accept. There was a beat of surprised silence on the other end, then an audible smile in her voice. That is fantastic news, Zephyr. Absolutely fantastic. The team will be thrilled. We were so impressed with your work on protein degradation. Thank you. I'm excited to get started, he said. There's one condition. I need to start as soon as possible. I'm available to be in the office in 1 week. 1 week? Sarah sounded taken aback. That's a fast timeline, especially for a cross-country move. Are you sure? I'm sure, he said. Personal circumstances have changed. I'm ready for a fresh start. I understand, she said, her voice softening with professional empathy. We can absolutely make that work. I'll email you the official offer letter for your signature right now. Once you send it back, I'll connect you with our relocation team. They're miracle workers. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. He hung up. A wave of something that felt like vertigo washed over him. It was done. Step 1 was complete. 5 minutes later, the official offer letter landed in his inbox. He stared at it. The Genentech logo, the salary, the title. It was real. Next, he opened a new browser tab and navigated to the Genzyme employee portal. He found the HR directory and the number for the head of his division's human resources. This was the call he dreaded most. He had been with Genzyme for 12 years. It had been his professional home. But that home was in a city that was no longer his. He dialed the number. Hi, this is Zephyr Hayes. I need to speak with Martha. A few moments later, his HR director was on the line. Zephyr, what's up? I thought you were in the lab today. Martha, I need to inform you that I am resigning from my position at Genzyme, effective immediately. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. What? Zephyr, what are you talking about? Is this a joke? We just gave you a promotion. I know, and I'm grateful for the opportunities Genzyme has given me, he said, the words feeling rehearsed and hollow. But I've received an offer that I cannot refuse. It's a significant advancement, and it requires me to relocate. Relocate where? Zephyr, we can talk about this. We can counter. You are one of our most valuable researchers. The patents you're on are critical. This was the leverage he knew he had. I appreciate that, Martha, but my decision is final. It's for personal reasons. I'm calling to discuss the terms of my separation. He could hear her sigh, the sound of a manager facing a massive, unexpected headache. Okay, Zephyr, given your tenure, your contributions, and the non-compete clause in your contract, the company is prepared to be flexible. We can offer a severance package of 6 months' salary. He did the math in his head. 6 months of his $124,000 salary was $62,000. And my accrued vacation time? He asked. We'll pay that out as well. It looks like you have about 4 weeks banked. Another $10,000. A total package of over $70,000. Combined with the $50,000 signing bonus, he would have a substantial cushion. That is acceptable, he said. Please have the paperwork sent to my personal email address. The next call was to a national moving company. He explained the situation. I need to move the contents of a 2-bedroom apartment from Boston to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I need a packing team at my apartment on Wednesday morning. The agent on the phone whistled. That's a rush job, sir. It's going to be expensive. You're looking at an expedited cross-country fee. The total estimate would be around $15,000. I'll take it, Zephyr said without hesitation. The $50,000 signing bonus was already being put to work. His final call was to a property management firm that specialized in high-end Beacon Hill rentals. He explained that he owned a 2-bedroom condo on Mount Vernon Street and needed it managed, cleaned, and rented out as soon as possible. Mount Vernon Street? The agent, a woman named Claire, said, her voice filled with professional enthusiasm. Those units are highly sought after. We can easily get $6,000 a month for a 2-bedroom in that location, maybe more if the finishes are good." $6,000 a month, Zephyr repeated. That would more than cover the $4,800 mortgage and taxes. His largest liability would become a source of income. "Please proceed. I can have the keys dropped off tomorrow." He closed his laptop. It was 10:45 a.m. In just over 2 hours, he had dismantled his Boston life and laid the foundation for a new one. He felt a profound, chilling sense of control. For years, he had been reacting to Sasha's whims, her moods, her demands. Now, he was the one taking action. He was no longer a character in her story. He was the author of his own. The rest of Monday was a blur of detached, methodical action. Zephyr drove to a FedEx office location on his way out of the city. He paid $3.75 to print the single page of his Genentech offer letter. He laid it on the counter, took a deep breath, and signed his name with a steady hand. The signature was firm, a black line drawn under his old life. He scanned the document and emailed it back to Sarah Chen from his phone. At 3:05 p.m., he received a confirmation email. He was officially an employee of Genentech. The strike was now irreversible. He didn't go back to the Back Bay apartment. He couldn't. It felt like a contaminated site. Instead, he drove to Beacon Hill. He parked his Honda in the resident spot he still paid for and let himself into his condo. The air inside was still and cool. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, slanting through the tall, wavy glass windows. The place smelled faintly of old wood, books, and disuse. His furniture was still there, covered in white sheets like ghosts. A sturdy, comfortable sofa, a solid oak dining table his grandfather had made, shelves filled with his textbooks and science fiction novels. This was his home. A home he had abandoned for a soulless rental to appease a woman who held him in contempt. A profound sense of regret, followed by a wave of anger, washed over him. Anger at Sasha, but also at himself, for being so willing to set aside his own happiness for so long. He spent the rest of Monday and all of Tuesday in his true home, preparing. He didn't pack everything. He packed what mattered. He went through his clothes, sorting them into 3 piles: keep, donate, and trash. He kept the practical, well-made items. He donated the expensive, uncomfortable suits Sasha had made him buy for events he hated. He packed his books, his research notes, the framed photo of his parents. He found a small box of mementos from the early days of his relationship with Sasha. Ticket stubs from a concert, a dried flower from a bouquet he'd given her. He looked at them for a long moment, then dropped the entire box into a trash bag. He logged into his bank accounts. He had his primary checking and savings with one bank, and the joint account with Sasha at another. He methodically transferred the entirety of his savings, over $250,000, the result of years of bonuses and disciplined investing, into a new, individual account he opened online with a completely different bank. He left exactly $4,000 in the joint account, enough to cover the next month's rent on the Back Bay apartment and 1 week of her usual spending. It wasn't kindness. It was a strategic buffer, a way to ensure the transition was clean, without the messy drama of an eviction notice. He then called the credit card company and had Sasha removed as an authorized user from his primary account, the one with the $50,000 limit that she used like her personal expense account. Her own card, linked to the account, would be declined the next time she tried to use it. He booked his flight, Friday, 2:30 p.m., Boston Logan to San Francisco International. He used his own credit card points to upgrade to a first-class seat, a $100 and $200 ticket that cost him nothing, a small, symbolic luxury for a man who had denied himself so much. Wednesday morning at 8:45 a.m., he drove back to the Back Bay apartment for the final act. He let himself in. Sasha was not there. A note on the counter, written on a piece of $15 stationery, read, "At yoga, then brunch with the girls. Try not to be so moody tonight, Joe." At exactly 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. It was the moving crew, 4 men in uniform, with stacks of boxes and rolls of tape. "We're here for the Hayes move," the foreman said. "That's me," Zephyr said. "Please come in." He directed them with quiet efficiency. "Only my things," he instructed. "The clothes in the second closet, all the books, the computer in the office, the leather armchair in the living room." He pointed to the worn, comfortable chair she had always complained about, calling it an eyesore. "Everything else stays." The men worked quickly, a whirlwind of professional activity. They packed his life into brown cardboard boxes, labeling each one with a black marker. Kitchen, Zed. Office, Zed. Closet, Zed. The apartment, once filled to the brim with their combined possessions, began to look sparse, hollowed out. The movers were wrapping the armchair in a thick blanket when the front door opened. Sasha walked in, flushed and glowing from her morning activities, carrying a shopping bag from Lululemon, a purchase that was probably around $300. She stopped dead in the entryway, her smile dissolving. Her eyes darted from the movers to the stacks of boxes, to the empty spaces on the bookshelves. "Zephyr? What is this?" she asked, her voice tight with confusion. "What's going on? Are we moving? You didn't tell me we were moving." Zephyr turned to face her. His expression was calm, his posture relaxed. He felt no need to raise his voice. He had all the power. "No, Sasha," he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the room. "I am moving." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean you are moving? Moving where? To your condo? Is this some kind of stunt because you're mad about what I said?" She let out a nervous laugh. "This is a little dramatic, even for you." "It's not a stunt," he said. He watched as the movers carried his last box of books out the door. The armchair was next. "This is a consequence." The foreman approached him with a clipboard. "That's all the items you indicated, sir. If you'll just sign here." Zephyr signed the paperwork. He handed the man a folded $100 bill. "Thank you for your team's efficiency." As the last mover exited, closing the door behind him, the apartment fell silent. It was just the two of them now, standing in the wreckage of their shared life. Sasha's confusion was rapidly turning to panic, and then to a familiar, ugly anger. "A consequence? What are you talking about? You can't just pack up your things and leave. We are married. You owe me an explanation, Zephyr." He walked over to his briefcase, which sat on the now empty coffee table. He opened it and took out a simple manila folder. He held it out to her. "The explanation is in here," he said. Sasha stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. She didn't take it. Her hands were trembling slightly. "I don't want a folder, Zephyr. I want you to talk to me. What did I say that was so bad?" "It's what I'm always saying. You're being overly sensitive." "That's the point, Sasha," he said, his voice devoid of heat. "You're always saying it, and I'm done hearing it." He placed the folder on the kitchen island, a slab of white quartz that had cost $10,000 to install. "You have a choice. You can look at what's in this folder now, or you can find out from my lawyer. But either way, this is happening." Her face went pale. The word lawyer had landed like a physical blow. She slowly reached out and picked up the folder. Her fingers, usually so steady when applying eyeliner or signing a credit card receipt, fumbled with the clasp. Inside there were 3 documents. The first was a copy of his resignation letter to Genzyme. The second was a copy of his new employment contract with Genentech. He had used a black marker to redact the salary, but the title, Senior Scientist, the company name, and the South San Francisco location were all clearly visible. The third and final document was a letter from a high-powered Boston divorce attorney, a man who billed at $1,200 per hour, whom Zephyr had retained that morning. The letter was a formal notice of his intent to file for divorce, on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. It stated that Mr. Hayes had already secured separate living arrangements and that all future communication regarding financial and material assets should be directed to the attorney's office. She read through the papers, her breath growing short, her eyes, wide with disbelief, flickered from the pages to his face and back again. The reality of the situation began to dawn on her, not as a single wave, but as a series of cascading shocks. Genentech? San Francisco? She whispered, the words catching in her throat. You took a job in California? Without even talking to me? You made it clear my career choices weren't ambitious enough for you, he said, quoting her own past criticisms. This is an ambitious move. It's what a man who knows his worth would do. He was using her own words, turning them into weapons of precise, devastating truth. But, we're married, she stammered, the legal and social implications crashing down on her. Our life is here. My job is here. My friends. Our life, he repeated, the words tasting like ash. This isn't a life, Sasha. This is a business arrangement where I fund a lifestyle for you in exchange for being told I'm not good enough. The arrangement is now terminated. He picked up his briefcase. The rent on this apartment is paid through the end of next month. The money in our joint account should cover your immediate expenses. After that, you will have to rely on your own $55,000 a year salary. Panic flared in her eyes. Pure, undiluted financial terror. My salary? Zephyr, I can't live on that. This apartment, the car, I can't afford any of this without you. I know, he said, and he turned and walked toward the door. Zephyr, wait, she cried, the anger and disbelief now replaced by raw desperation. Please, don't do this. We can fix this. I'm sorry. I'll stop. I'll never mention Aiden again, I swear. He paused at the door, his back to her. He didn't turn around. It's not about Aiden, Sasha. It was never really about him. He was just the name you gave to your disappointment in me. The problem is, you were never proud of me, not for who I am. And I finally realized that my job isn't to make you proud. It's to be proud of myself. He opened the door and walked out, not looking back. He didn't slam it. He just closed it quietly behind him, leaving her alone in the silent, half-empty apartment that was no longer his problem. He spent the next 2 nights at his Beacon Hill condo, sleeping soundly in his own bed for the first time in years. His phone, which he had set to Do Not Disturb, began to light up with a fury of notifications. The consequences were beginning to cascade. The first voicemail came at 5:23 p.m. on Wednesday. It was Sasha, her voice shrill with rage. How dare you, Zephyr Hayes? How dare you just walk out and leave me with this mess? You think you can just destroy my life and run away to California? You have another thing coming. You will regret this. The second came at 9:47 p.m. The anger had been replaced by a pleading, manipulative tone he knew all too well. Baby, please call me. I've been a mess. I was just upset. I say stupid things when I'm stressed. You know that. I didn't mean it. I love you. We can't throw away 5 years over one stupid comment. Just, please, come home. We can talk. He listened to the messages with a kind of detached anthropological interest. He was studying a subject he had once been intimately involved with but was now observing from behind a wall of glass. Thursday morning, the panic began in earnest. A text message at 10:12 a.m. I tried to buy groceries and the credit card was declined. The one for emergencies. What did you do, Zephyr? Did you cancel it? That's our card. Another voicemail followed at 3:05 p.m. Her voice was trembling, on the verge of tears. I called the bank. They said you removed me from the account, and I checked the joint savings. It's empty. All of it. All our money is gone. Zephyr, what am I supposed to do? The payment for my Audi is due next week. It's $600. The rent here is $3,200. My paycheck doesn't even cover the rent. What am I supposed to do? The enumeration of her downfall was a stark, mathematical reality she was finally being forced to confront. The Audi A3, her symbol of stylish independence, was now an anchor pulling her under. The chic Back Bay apartment, her stage for entertaining friends, was a financial trap she couldn't escape. Her weekly $300 yoga and brunch outings, her $250 hair appointments, her spontaneous $1,000 shopping sprees, all of it gone. The entire architecture of her life, a life built on his income, had been demolished in a single day. The final voicemail arrived on Friday morning, just as he was getting ready to leave for the airport. Her voice was broken, defeated. It was a wet, hiccuping sob. "Please. Zephyr, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I get it now. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. You're a good man. You're a wonderful man. Please just don't leave me." He deleted the message. Forgiveness was something he might find one day, for his own peace. But absolution was not his to give. Her consequences were hers to bear. He picked up his single suitcase and his briefcase, took one last look around his beautiful Beacon Hill condo, and walked out to the waiting car that would take him to Logan Airport and to his new life. 1 year later. The California sun was warm on Zephyr's face. It was 9 sour a.m. on a Saturday, and he was finishing a 10-mile run along the San Francisco Bay Trail. To his left, the waters of the bay sparkled. In the distance, the iconic orange-red of the Golden Gate Bridge pierced through a thin layer of morning fog. The air was cool and smelled of salt and eucalyptus. He felt strong. He felt clear. He felt free. His life was unrecognizably different and entirely his own. He lived in a simple, one-bedroom apartment in San Bruno, a quiet suburb just south of the city. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, comfortable, and had a small balcony with a view of the rolling green hills. The rent was $2,400 a month, a comfortable fraction of his new $185,000 salary. His Beacon Hill condo, managed by the excellent Claire, was leased to a young doctor and his wife for $6,200 a month. After the mortgage and expenses, it generated over $400 in pure profit, which went directly into his retirement account. His finances, once a source of constant stress, were now a foundation of profound security. His work at Genentech was the most fulfilling of his career. He was respected. His intellect was valued. He was leading a team of bright, eager young scientists, and their research into a new targeted therapy was showing incredible promise. He had found his professional tribe, a community of people who spoke his language, who shared his passion for the quiet, painstaking work of discovery. There were no comparisons to anyone's ex-boyfriend. There was only the data, the science, and the shared goal of making a difference. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. It was, as the lawyers say, uncontested. Sasha, faced with the stark reality of her financial situation, had been unable to afford a prolonged legal battle. Through his lawyer, Zephyr had been fair. He didn't go after her small savings or her job. He let her keep the furniture, the art, the expensive detritus of the life she had wanted. He had simply severed the connection, cutting the financial cord that had been her lifeline. He heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had been forced to break the lease on the Back Bay apartment, costing her a significant penalty. She had sold her Audi and now lived in a small studio in Allston, a neighborhood she used to mock as being for students and losers. She had, for the first time in her adult life, been forced to live within her means. But Zephyr rarely thought about her anymore. His life was too full. 3 afternoons a week, after work, he drove to Oakland to volunteer at a community center. He had started a mentorship program for young Black high school students interested in STEM careers. He helped them with their science projects, gave them advice on college applications, and shared his own story. The story of a kid from a working-class neighborhood who fell in love with science and built a life from it. He was in the middle of a session with a bright, curious 17-year-old girl named Amani. Her hair was styled in beautiful box braids with blue beads at the ends that clicked softly when she moved. She was showing him her proposal for a science fair project on CRISPR technology. "I'm just worried it's too ambitious, Dr. Hayes," she said, chewing on her lip. "My teacher said maybe I should pick something simpler." Zephyr looked at her, at the spark of passion and intelligence in her eyes. He saw a younger version of himself. "There is no such thing as too ambitious, Imani," he said, his voice warm and certain. "There are only goals that require more steps. Don't let anyone ever tell you to think smaller. Your mind is the most valuable thing you will ever own. Let it be as big as it wants to be." She beamed, her confidence restored. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes." "Call me Zephyr," he said with a smile. Driving home that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple over the Pacific Ocean, he felt a sense of peace that was deeper than mere happiness. It was the peace of alignment, of a life lived in accordance with his own values. Sasha's cruel words, once so powerful, were now just a faint echo from a distant past. "You'll never be half the man my ex was." He finally understood the truth. She was right, in a way. He wasn't half the man Aiden was. He wasn't a man who measured his worth by the price of his watch or the brand of his car. He wasn't a man who needed to project success through expensive objects. He was a scientist, a mentor, a man who found joy in a long run, in a difficult problem, in helping a young mind catch fire. He was, finally and completely, himself. He had come to realize that the most important move he made wasn't the 3,000 miles he flew across the country. It was the 18 inches he traveled from his head to his heart, where he discovered his own unshakable worth. True wealth isn't found in a bank account or a luxury brand. It's the quiet confidence of knowing who you are, the freedom of living a life that is authentically yours, and the joy of building something that will outlast you. It's about finding your own pride, not in the eyes of others, but deep within yourself. What do you think is the most important part of self-worth? Share your thoughts with our community in the comments. And thank you for joining us on Love Beyond Pride.